The alarms on my ship were still ringing when 4 armored guards stepped through the airlock and told me my life was over. I remember laughing at first, because it sounded like a joke. I was a cargo pilot named Daniel Ashford, hauling scrap metal between orbital stations for a living, and nothing about my life had ever been interesting enough for anyone to notice, let alone armed enforcers from an empire that ruled half the galaxy. But the woman in front of me did not smile. She read my name off a datapad, confirmed my identity with a scan of my eyes, and told me that by order of the Vashtaran Empress, I was to be married within the hour. I asked if this was some kind of mistake. She said no. She said I had been chosen because I was ordinary, because I was nothing. Because that was exactly the point. They marched me through a ship 20 times the size of anything I had ever flown, past guards who looked at me like I was something they had stepped in, until I reached a chamber with high silver walls and a floor that glowed faintly blue. And there, standing perfectly still in a gown that looked like it was made of captured starlight, was the most furious person I had ever seen in my life. Her name was Illyra. I would learn that later. In that moment, all I knew was that her eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they were locked on me with a hatred so pure, it felt like standing too close to a fire. Nobody explained anything to me before the ceremony. I found out afterward, from a nervous translator droid, that Illyra was the Empress's daughter, and that she had insulted her own mother in front of the entire Vashtaran court during a peace summit with Earth. She had called the alliance with humanity an embarrassment. She had said it loud enough for every camera in the room to catch it. The Empress had decided on the punishment personally. Illyra would marry a human, not a diplomat, not a soldier, not anyone with rank or meaning. Someone plucked at random from a supply route. Someone whose only qualification was being unremarkable enough to make the humiliation complete. That someone was me. The ceremony lasted 11 minutes. Illyra never looked at me once. When it was over, she turned to the cameras, said something in her own language that made 3 nobles flinch, and walked out without waiting for me. I stood there in a borrowed suit, newly married to an alien princess who despised me, and thought, this is going to be a very long week. It was not a week. It became months. They put us on my own ship at first, which I think was meant as another insult to her, forcing royalty to live in a cargo hauler, with rust on the walls, and a coffee maker held together with tape. Illyra treated the whole arrangement like a war she intended to win. She refused to eat what I cooked. She refused to sleep in the same room. She spoke to me only when she wanted to remind me how far beneath her I was. I did not fight her on any of it. I had learned a long time ago that some people want you to break, and giving them that satisfaction only makes things worse. So I kept flying my routes. I kept fixing my own engine. I made 2 cups of coffee every morning instead of 1, and left the second one outside her door, and never once mentioned it when it disappeared. The turning point, if I had to name one, happened 3 weeks in, during a supply run to a mining station near the edge of contested space. I was elbow deep in a coolant line when the ship's proximity alarm went off, sharp and sudden, the kind of sound that makes your whole body go cold before your brain even understands why. 3 unmarked vessels had dropped out of warp, less than 200 kilometers from us. Not Vashtaran military, not Earth Patrol, independent raiders, the kind who made a living stripping ships for parts and leaving the crew stranded in the dark. I grabbed the comm and started broadcasting our registration, hoping it would be enough to make them look elsewhere. It was not. A targeting lock chimed on my console, and I felt my stomach drop through the floor. Illyra appeared in the cockpit doorway, and for the first time since our wedding, she looked at me like I was actually a person instead of a punishment. "What is happening?" she asked, and her voice had lost its usual edge. I told her the truth. Raiders. Targeting lock. My ship had no weapons, only a cargo hold full of scrap that was not worth dying over. She did not panic. She sat down in the co-pilot seat without asking permission and started reading the sensor display like she understood every symbol on it. Which, I would learn, she did. Vashtaran royalty were trained in tactics from childhood, even the ones who spent most of their lives in ceremonial gowns pretending they had never learned to fight. "Bank left," she said. "Now." I did not question her. I threw the ship into a hard turn, and a heat signature streaked past exactly where we had been a second earlier. My hands were shaking on the controls, but hers were steady, calling out headings and thruster angles like she had done this 100 times before. "We are too slow to outrun them," she said, "but their scanners are old. If we drop into the debris field ahead, they will lose our signal for 11 seconds. That is enough time." "Enough time for what?" I asked. "For you to shut down every system that is not keeping us alive," she said. "Let them think we are dead already." I killed the engines, the lights, even the emergency beacon, and we drifted into a graveyard of broken satellites and old mining equipment, silent as a held breath. The raiders swept past twice, their scanners sweeping over debris that looked exactly like the wreck they were expecting to find. On the third pass, they gave up and turned toward easier targets. We sat in the dark for almost 10 minutes before either of us spoke. "You saved my ship," I said. "I saved my own life as well," she said, "but there was less venom in it than usual. Do not mistake it for anything more." I did not argue with her, but something had shifted, and we both knew it. That night, for the first time, she ate dinner at the same table as me. She did not say much, but she did not leave either. After that, things changed slowly, the way ice melts, not all at once but in small places you do not notice, until suddenly the whole surface is different. She started asking questions about Earth, not to mock it, but because she genuinely did not understand it. Why did humans cry at things that were not deadly? Why did they forgive people who had wronged them? Why did they choose partners instead of having them assigned by bloodline calculations? I told her the truth every time, because feelings do not wait for permission. Because holding on to anger costs more than it is worth. Because love, when it happens, does not care what anyone calculated in advance. She listened to all of it, like someone hearing a foreign language for the first time, and slowly beginning to understand the words. I learned things about her too. I learned that she had never once, in her entire life, been allowed to make a decision that was only her own. Every meal, every friendship, every hour of her childhood had been planned by advisors who saw her not as a person, but as a piece to be positioned. The insult that got her exiled into this marriage had not been an act of arrogance. It had been the first honest thing she had said in public in years, and it had cost her everything. "I do not regret the words," she told me one night, staring out at the stars. "I regret that no one was listening for the truth in them. They only heard the shame." I told her I had heard the truth in them. She looked at me for a long moment after that, and something in her expression cracked open just slightly, like a door left unlatched. We were 3 months into the marriage when the real danger arrived, and it did not come from raiders or debris fields. It came wearing the uniform of the Vashtaran court. An imperial envoy named Voss arrived on a diplomatic shuttle, claiming he had orders from the empress herself. He requested a private audience with Illyra, and when she refused to leave me alone with him, he simply said what he had come to say in front of both of us. The marriage was becoming a liability, he explained. What had been designed as a punishment was instead turning into something that looked, to certain factions within the court, dangerously close to genuine affection. A human consort, with real influence over an imperial princess, was not something the old bloodline factions could tolerate. It threatened the very foundation the empire had been built on for 1,000 years. The empress, he said, was prepared to annul the marriage quietly. Daniel Ashford would be relocated to a comfortable posting on the edge of the empire, well compensated, and never spoken of again. Illyra would return to the court, her punishment complete, her reputation restored. I watched her face while he spoke, waiting for her to agree, because it would have been the easy thing to do, the safe thing, the thing that let her keep everything she had grown up believing mattered. Instead, she stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "Tell my mother," she said, her voice steady in a way I had never heard before, "that I did not marry a punishment. I married a man who taught me more about honesty in 3 months than the entire imperial court taught me in 20 years. If she wants to end this marriage, she will have to say so to my face, not send a messenger to say it to his." Voss looked genuinely startled. He reminded her that defying the empress publicly would be seen as an act of rebellion, that the consequences could reach far beyond just the two of us, that entire trade agreements and diplomatic treaties hung on the stability of the imperial bloodline. "Then let the empire see clearly," Illyra said, "what it almost destroyed in the name of protecting itself. She requested a formal audience with the full court, the kind reserved for matters of succession and treaty. Voss tried to talk her out of it 3 more times, before he finally, reluctantly, agreed to arrange it. The night before we left for the Imperial homeworld, I found her standing at the viewport of my ship, watching the stars the way she always did, when she was thinking too hard to sleep. "You do not have to do this," I told her. "You could let the annulment happen. Go back to your life. No one would blame you." "I would blame me," she said. "For the rest of my life, I would know I chose safety over truth, the same thing I always accused everyone else of doing." I asked her if she was afraid. She turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that had nothing to do with royal composure or imperial training. It was simply fear, honest and unguarded. "I am terrified," she said. "Not of my mother, not of the court. I am terrified because somewhere in these last months, without meaning to, I stopped seeing this marriage as a punishment, and I do not know what to do with feelings I was never trained to have." I did not have a clever answer for that. I only told her that whatever happened tomorrow, I was not going anywhere unless she asked me to, and that being terrified of something did not mean it was wrong. She did not say anything back. She simply reached out and took my hand, and we stood there together, watching the stars, until the ship's systems dimmed the lights for the night cycle. The Imperial Court Chamber was larger than any building I had ever stood inside, its ceiling lost somewhere in shadows far above us, its floor lined with nobles in gowns and uniforms that probably cost more than every ship I had ever owned combined. The Empress sat at the far end on a throne, carved from something that glowed faintly silver, her expression unreadable, her eyes fixed on her daughter the moment we walked in. Voss stood beside the throne and announced the matter for the court's consideration, the possible annulment of the marriage between Princess Illyra Vashtain and the human Daniel Ashford, citing concerns over the stability of the bloodline and the influence of foreign attachment on imperial succession. The Empress asked her daughter directly if she wished the marriage dissolved. I expected Illyra to hesitate. She did not. "No," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the entire chamber. "I do not." A murmur rippled through the nobles. The Empress raised a hand for silence and asked her daughter to explain herself, reminding her that the entire court was watching, that whatever she said next could not be taken back. Illyra turned, not toward her mother, but toward the assembled nobles, the same people who had watched her humiliation months earlier, with barely concealed satisfaction. "You gave me this marriage as a punishment," she said. "You believed that forcing me to live among humans, to depend on one, to be seen with one, would teach me my place. You believed it would break something in me. And it did break something. It broke the belief that status was the same as worth. It broke the idea that a person's value could be measured by their bloodline instead of their character. I stand here married to a man this court considers beneath me, and I tell you honestly, he has shown me more integrity in a single conversation than I have witnessed in this entire chamber in my whole life." She looked at me then, and something in her voice softened even as it grew stronger. "He did not seek power when he married me. He did not seek status. He asked nothing of me except honesty, and he gave me nothing but honesty in return. If that is a punishment, then I welcome it, because it has taught me more about what matters than 20 years in this court ever did." The chamber was utterly silent. I could feel every eye in the room shifting between Illyra, the Empress, and me, waiting to see who would speak next, waiting to see if the Empire's foundations were about to crack in front of everyone. The Empress rose slowly from her throne. For a long moment, she said nothing at all, her gaze moving over her daughter's face like she was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. "You were sent into that marriage to learn humility," she finally said. "It seems instead you have learned conviction. I am not certain which lesson I intended, but I find I cannot argue with the result." She turned to the assembled court, and her voice took on the weight of formal decree. "The marriage stands," she announced, "not as punishment, but as recognition. Let it be known that the imperial bloodline does not measure worth by species, but by character, effective from this day forward." The chamber erupted into a mixture of murmurs, some approving, some clearly displeased, but none of them mattered anymore, because Illyra was looking at me across the vast chamber with an expression I had never seen on her before, Something that looked almost like relief, almost like joy, entirely unguarded. Afterward, once the court had dispersed, and the nobles had gone back to whispering among themselves about what this meant for the future of the empire, Illyra found me alone in a quiet hallway near the shuttle bay. "I did not marry you by choice," she said, "but I choose to stay married to you by choice. There is a difference, and I wanted you to hear me say it plainly." I told her that was the best proposal I had ever received, considering we were already married, and for the first time since I had known her, she actually laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of her like she had forgotten she was capable of it. We flew back to my ship together that night, the same rusted cargo hauler that had once been her prison and had somehow become, without either of us fully noticing when it happened, something closer to a home. I made 2 cups of coffee the next morning, the way I always did, and this time she was already sitting at the table waiting for hers before I even finished pouring. I never set out to win a princess's heart. I was just trying to get through the week without losing my ship, my sanity, or my life, to an empire that saw me as nothing more than an insult with a heartbeat. But somewhere between the raiders in the dark and the silence in that vast imperial chamber, I stopped being a punishment to her, and she stopped being untouchable to me, and what was left between us was something neither of our worlds had a name for, something we were still learning to build one honest morning at a time.